fan, whether you were down there collecting pullover jerseys or whether you were there watching Kevin Gausman collect Rays outs, and certainly double plays were collected over the weekend. But 4 victories over the weekend for the Orioles after a little tough spot last week in Arlington and a choppy start to the Padres, and now they head west. Alan McCallum, our Orioles historian and longtime insider, joins us here to discuss what was not a perfect weekend, but certainly, Alan, perfect results all weekend long, especially that late Saturday night game. That was one where they got in there and stole that one.
It's hard to look at the Orioles and where they are right now and find fault. I mean, they're at 15 games over 500. They're at their high watermark for the season. On paper, in terms of the standings anyway, they're as far along as anyone could ask. And the results are pretty good. I mean, they did exactly what you're supposed to do against a struggling team and beat the tar out of them. Whether you jump out early or come from behind or have to hang on to a big lead, I mean, all the things that needed to happen took place. And, there are certainly still things wrong with this team to look at, but they're playing through them as well as anybody could ask. And at this point, you're asking not can or will they get to the playoffs, but how do they get? What do they need to do to get deep into the playoffs at this point? And barring major injury, whether it's winning the division or getting it as a wild card, it's hard to see them not getting there one way or another.
Well, I wouldn't quite go that far, but I would agree that these teams chasing them look to be chasing them now, and every night they take the hill with a different pitcher and a different opportunity to have things even go wrong. And even when Tillman doesn't make the best start of, in his arsenal, they somehow find a way to, have the T.J. McFarland sort of bail him out, right?
Well, so as the heat has heated up, so to speak, this team, from a pitching standpoint, was sort of surprising everyone early on when it was cold and damp at how well they were pitching. Well, June hit, maybe late May, and as soon as it started to heat up, the ball started flying out, or at least that the tide was turning for the Orioles starting pitching. And a lot of the things that we were concerned about have come to pass. And as the flip side of that was as it started to get warmer, a lot of the offensive problems have started to go away because the ball really has started flying out for the Orioles in a way that it didn't always over the first couple of months of the season. Obviously, they've always relied on the home run, but we saw long stretches, a week at a time where they would struggle to score runs, and that really hasn't been the case here in the last several weeks. So,
well, it helps when Chris Davis could sort of inside out a grand slam opposite field. That sort of stuff wasn't happening 3 or 4 years ago for him, for sure.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, as much as he's always had the power, he's always had the ability to do that. But when he gets a fastball, basically up and out over the plate on a 1-2 count, it was just a horrible pitch from Smiley. Chris Davis knows what to do with that. So,
well, the shift has also greatly affected what he has to do to be an effective hitter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I guess the bottom line is that there really isn't a soft point in this lineup right now. Trumbo and Alvarez and even, Kim and Rickard and Reimold, the guys that are filling roles, help deepen this lineup. So you can say for anybody, well, they made a bad pitch and he took it out for basically anybody in the lineup because they're all capable of doing that. And yeah, if you're Chris Davis, you start to heat up a little bit. Same thing with Adam Jones. We've waited for both of these guys for a while now, and they're certainly hitting their stride at this point as Mark Trumbo is slowing down, and Manny Machado has come back to earth a little bit. Still very productive, but not the MVP-like numbers he's putting up in the first 2 months of the season. But yeah, Chris Davis is certainly sort of knows his role on the team, and it works for him because he doesn't have to carry the team on a regular basis, although we know that when he gets hot, he can and will. Jonathan Scope is doing that right now. Adam Jones is doing that right now. And Chris Davis has certainly lent a hand. So the bottom line is that this club, for a couple weeks there, we saw the Red Sox for about a month just hit it with insane efficiency, sort of hiding their starting pitching issues. And then as they cooled off, the Toronto Blue Jays took off for about 12 to 15 days doing the same thing to get themselves back in the race. And they started to cool off a little bit here. And now the Orioles, who had been sort of slow and steady, much the way they have been over this 5-year stretch of respectability under Buck, they were sort of putting along like that, and now they've hit the stride where the offense is really taking off, and they're sort of disguising their starting pitching issues along the same way. And for that matter, some of the bullpen woes, not having Darren O'Day, and the use of Michael Givens on occasion, and Vance Worley being on the DL. I mean, there are some issues that they're having to work around in the bullpen as well, and the offense and the defense with J.J. Hardy coming back now just looks really good again on the infield. So, I mean, those things are really disguising some of the things that you would be concerned about for the Orioles right now.
Well, I think even when they get in trouble, they're always a double play ball away from getting out of it, as we learned on Saturday and even early in the game on Sunday. Having
or a
defense
from Adam Jones in center field.
Oh, right. Or Rickard going over to the line and
right.
making a play and Scope, propping him up or whatever. I mean, even when there's miscommunication and things could go wrong and it could go all Keystone Cops, good things have happened here in the last week, and that's how you start to string together and put a little distance between you and the other teams. And let's be honest, throughout baseball, there's a lot of that going on in a lot of these other divisions. The division races are really starting to spread out right now.
Well, and the Tampa Bay Rays, who the Orioles just finished demolishing, have just run the gauntlet, facing arguably the three hottest teams in the game right now, back to back to back. They're not,
and their season's over. Their season's over now, right? I mean, you look at them and say 13 and a half out. They lost their season in June in Baltimore on a weekend, right?
Yeah, I think you'd have to say that. I mean, they still have some nice pieces, and they have some young pitchers that I think are going to do well in the long run. But yeah, I think that any hopes of them contending to any degree is pretty much over at this point. You're looking at it and saying, what do we have? What should we hold on to? And then, is Kevin Cash the right guy? Is the general manager the right guy? Because the two people that you trusted have moved on to the Dodgers and the Cubs in those roles. So
I thought they had better pitching, Alan. I just did. I thought they had better and deeper pitching. I'm officially duped on the Tampa Rays. I bought in. I'm dumb.
No, they're not at all. I mean, they have talented young pitchers, but they're young, and they don't really have a veteran presence to help guide them, to help lead, to help show the way. And again, a new regime in control, and when that happens, you have to assess where you are. So I mean, I wouldn't say you're duped, but they have some more growing to do. It happens.
Alan McCallum joining us here, talking some Orioles baseball, and we talk about the pitching and where it goes. Finally, Gausman breaks through in the afternoon on Saturday. I don't even know that a lot of people know the game was going on. It kind of came and went. It was one of the better played games, I guess. And when you get that kind of a pitching effort from Kevin Gausman, even against the diminished version of the Tampa Rays, that's more what we need to see. And I like that he finally got a victory. I mean, it's about time, right?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, on a day where you get Gausman and Tillman, Gausman sort of played Tillman's role for that day, and Tillman struggled in the way we've seen Gausman on a few occasions here recently. So, look, this team needs Gausman to step up. I mean, I think we all know at this point, from a starting pitching standpoint anyway, Gausman, Tillman, even Dylan Bundy, we've seen a little bit from the first time here as we head into June.
Yeah, we're saying good things about him all of a sudden, right? It took a little while.
Absolutely. I mean, and these guys are the future of the starting rotation. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You can sort of see where the future lies, whether that comes to fruition, much like the Tampa Bay Rays, as you just described. I mean, it's something that only time will tell. But for this organization, as it exists right now, without spending money on starting pitchers to any degree, they need Gausman. We've talked about it for a long time, to be what they need, what they think he's going to be, and they need to nurse Dylan Bundy to the point where coming into next season he's ready to take a role. And Hunter Harvey's not there yet for a lot of reasons, but they're certainly counting on him as well. The Orioles need the guys that they have in house, that they have sort of assessed as the future to live up to that. And we know where that gets a lot of organizations to count on. Sort of 4 or 5 guys can be foolhardy, but Tillman
this is where they were 3 years ago, though, right? I mean, Gonzalez was a maybe. Chen was a maybe. Bud Norris was a never was. So was Tommy Hunter. But they had to work through these guys. I mean, even when it comes to Arrieta and Madison Britton, when that was what was going on, you give them the ball and you hope for the best. And if they win, you win. If they lose, you're going to lose because there's no help. I mean, there's no cavalry, Oliver Drake riding in to give you 6 innings. You know what I mean?
Gausman and Chen and Gonzalez were the guys that were supposed to carry the mantle to the future. And I think that both of them did that extremely well over the last few years, and probably will never get the credit they actually deserve. But yeah, I mean, the future as would be defined for the Orioles in terms of the blueprint that they would lay out if you're Dan Duquette or Buck Showalter is obviously Kevin Gausman and obviously Dylan Bundy, and hopefully someone that comes out of the draft they just had, where they concentrated on starting pitching, will show up as well. But it's not going to be 10 guys. If they're lucky, it'll be 2, and we'll get there quickly so that they can be added to this group.
Well, let's be honest. They were going to grow the arms and buy the bats. They wound up buying arms, right, with Gallardo and Jimenez because they had holes, right? So They spent money and they still have holes, which is really the exact opposite of what you want to do when you invest $48 million in a pitcher, right?
I will continue to tell you that it is my absolute belief that the best starting pitcher on the Orioles' 25-man roster right now is closing out the ninth inning. But they don't see Zach Britton that way, so it's a moot point. But I mean that they have had to. Nestor, we've talked about it. There are only a few organizations that have really consistently been good at developing their own starting pitching. And then there's some organizations that can go out and find good starting pitching. Billy Beane has an absolute knack for that in Oakland. The Mets have done a decent job with that, and you have teams like Seattle and Tampa Bay that have done some developing, but they've had to do a lot of losing at times to get to that point. So it's the toughest. Look, people say that playing quarterback in the NFL is the toughest position in sports. Maybe that's true, but the hardest position to develop, in my opinion, is starting pitching in Major League Baseball, because you don't need 1, you need 5, and if you need 5, what you actually need is probably 7 to get through the course of a Major League season. So finding that as a unit is an incredibly tough thing to do. And no matter how ingenious you are or savvy or the smartest guy in the room, you have to be continually creative because it's not going to work out the way you planned. So if there's any credit you give to Dan Duquette, and certainly Buck in the way he handles staff, it's that they have not let the deficiencies deter them at least 3 out of the last 5 seasons. And I speak during an unfinished season right now, but it's hard to argue with the results they've gotten so far in 2016.
All right, the Rays have now lost 11 in a row. The Orioles have won 5 in a row. The Indians in the Central have won 9 in a row, and the Orioles get a day off. They will travel out to San Diego, and as much as we've talked about the starting pitching and Jimenez and Gallardo, here is the 2-game series, right, against one of the worst teams on the planet. The other side of Tampa is San Diego that they scuffle with on Tuesday, beat on Wednesday. Now we'll play 2 games literally within 15 hours out of Petco Park very, very quickly with their 2 biggest question marks, and one of the guys who really hasn't even earned a spot in the rotation. If anything, he's earned a spot out of the rotation, but he's in the rotation. And, I know Luke took that subject on back on Wednesday when he took the ball against San Diego, and I guess we'll continue to take that on every time he takes the ball and say, at what point is he going to start looking like a guy who gives them a chance to win consistently? We're going to find out on this little San Diego trip, right?
Whether he's coming out of the bullpen, start making a start, or coming off the DL, anytime Ubaldo Jimenez is on the mound, there is one question and one question only: which Ubaldo Jimenez is he going to be today? And Ubaldo looking good for 7 innings in one start does not guarantee what he's going to look like the next day. I guess that's not the 5th day. I guess you can say that about anybody, but there's certainly better bets. There's certainly better bets you can take in Major League Baseball over Ubaldo. So, I mean,
I wouldn't bet American money. Maybe your money, but not my money on
Nice.
Ubaldo Jimenez. I don't think so. Mr. Angelos' money. Mr. Angelos spent a lot of money on Ubaldo Jimenez.
He really did. I mean, it's a cliche and it's become, sort of a thing to say, but it really is. I mean, it's a box of chocolates. The problem with that is that in theory, everything in a box of chocolates is supposed to be pretty good. And that is often not the case.
You never had my mother's box of chocolates. That stuff was horrible, dude. There was more half-eaten than man.
Your point taken.
That's before I liked salted caramel. Maybe I like it more now than I did in the 70s.
The dark chocolate coconut was, I wanted to stay away from that like the plague.
See, that's right up my alley now. But
right.
All right.
But the idea is that somebody likes them, right? And I don't know how anybody except his mom could like an outing that, let's say half of the outings that Ubaldo
Dude,
had.
my mom eats
So,
fruitcake, so you don't have to tell me.
they're going to the National League. They're going to be without the DH. They're going to be in a bigger park. In some ways that's good. The ball is less likely to fly out. In some ways it's bad because Ubaldo has been known to have the gaps find the balls that he gives up. And if he walks 2 or 3 guys in the process, it can get pretty ugly pretty fast. So, all you can do is sort of watch with one eye and, sort of hold your breath when he goes out there and you see see what happens. And, but I mean, quite frankly, at this point, you're saying the same thing about Tyler Wilson. Start's not quite as bad. And Gallardo, we're still trying to figure out what he's going to be. He's looked okay in his first 2 starts. He hasn't set the world ablaze, and he hasn't been magical, but he's been representative. And at this point, I think that's what you're looking for from him to get through the regular season. And quite frankly, if the offense stays, they're not going to stay this hot. It would be hard to do that. But if they continue to do what they have done through the course of the season, that's probably enough to get, to win, I don't know, 65, 70% of his starts.
With 17 hits in a game, you're going to win a lot of games when you hit the ball 17 times. You are, right?
You would certainly think so. So right now, you've got Tillman, you've got Gausman, you've got Gallardo, who I think when they go out to the mound, you have some hope that they have a chance to win. And Tyler Wilson is somewhere in the middle of that. And Ubaldo is not. It doesn't really fall in that category. And that's the 5 you're looking at right now. And
hey, but 6 innings on Tuesday night will change our mind about everything, right?
And on
it's
any
like
given
a football
night,
season, really. It's start to start. It's week to week, right? I mean, we love the way the Orioles smell this week. We didn't like it so much 4 weeks ago, though.
Well, the beginning of the week, you didn't like it either. I mean, they had their 2 ugliest losses basically to begin the week, and then they came back, after the second game back after Texas, they've looked really good, and they've started to march. And while that happened, and this is the key point to it, the Red Sox and Blue Jays have done a decent amount of losing, just enough to open up, I wouldn't say breathing room, but, slight separation more than they had previously, because the Red Sox and the Orioles have been chasing each other pretty hard for a while, and now there's some games here between the Red Sox and the Orioles, a little room for the Orioles to I wouldn't say relax. I'd just say
no,
nice.
But I don't think there's any relaxing. But I'll say this, Alan, when Adam Jones is hitting the ball like this and Chris Davis is hitting the ball like this, it's nice that Trumbo has carried them at various points. Machado, when he's not suspended, has been, by far the stabilizing force in the lineup, and Hardy hadn't even been around at different points. They've vacillated out in the outfield, whether it's Kim or Rickard, kind of going with the hot hand. But when Jones and Davis are going well, and they went well in the series against Tampa, you're going to win a lot of baseball games when those guys are going well. I think the question was they won a lot of games when those guys weren't going well, and Adam Jones wasn't going well for the first 60 days of the season.
No doubt about it, and you're absolutely right. Those guys have really done it. But let's not miss another important player to come back, sort of show up, and that's J.J. Hardy. Hasn't done a ton of the bats, hitting a few double plays here, but when J.J.'s on the infield, that defensive infield just goes. And you've seen how crisp they've looked with Manny back at third and Scope playing at second base. And JJ is a stabilizing force. There's nothing flashy. There's nothing sexy about the way he plays it, but he is the smartest infielder on this team. He's one of the smartest infielders in the sport, and he can play shortstop for me defensively anytime. He's looked a little rusty on a couple balls here and there because he hadn't played in 2 months, basically, but you can see the difference. You can feel the difference on how well, as a unit, they play defensively, and that has made a huge difference for this club since he's come back. Sort of resetting this defensive infield the way it should look, and it's helped the pitching, and it certainly gives the team confidence. You can just feel them play differently when JJ's on the field.
Alan McCallum joining us here to talk all things Orioles baseball as the Birds are now streaking and hot and pulling away in the American League East. Get a little downtime, get a little rest, going out to the West Coast, getting some fish tacos, who knows what else. Adam Jones getting some home cooking, which is nice. Then they're off to Seattle. They'll be out in the West Coast for the next week and a half, keeping us up late or afternoon baseball as they have on Wednesday. For the rest of the American League East here, Alan, it becomes a little bit rearview mirror, and you're not going to see these teams now for a little bit. And That's kind of cool, but it's even cooler that this is the first time in a long, long relationship you and I have had over 2 decades where we're sitting here before the 4th of July, and the Orioles aren't just in the race, they're becoming the race, and
Yeah.
they're really in a situation here. And I know we have a Jimenez and Gallardo in the bottom of the rotation, and they're going out to the West Coast, and it'll be sleepy, but they're playing, a bad team and a couple of good teams here before it's all over with. This is really an opportunity that you start to get visions of, man, could they have a 7 or 8 game lead by the All-Star break? Is that possible? Where are they going to be on the 4th of July? We're going to find out. We're getting up on that now and going out to L.A. a week out on that. This is really – they don't strike me as being this good, right? This doesn't feel like this powerhouse Oriole team. But and I guess in all those years when we sat with our nose pressed up to the glass watching the Red Sox and the Yankees be so much better, obviously better – I don't look at the Orioles as being obviously better than any of these teams. I think they've had some good fortune, and I think maybe we underestimated how well they would hit the ball. And certainly in the case of Trumbo, in the case of Wieters,
Alvarez has come on here.
Alvarez, sure. Rickard and Kim were also huge unknowns that they have managed over the first 90 days of the season to really be a powerhouse that – even when Jones isn't going well, Trumbo will be. And I don't expect Trumbo to continue this the way Nelson Cruz did in the second half of the 1 year that he gave us. But, if there's as long as he doesn't turn into the 198 Dave Kingman guy that can't find the ball at some point, even if he hits 245 the rest of the way, this is going to be a banner year for him. And clearly – the ball hasn't begun to carry, as you pointed out over the weekend. We haven't even seen the hot days yet.
Well, you're right. Trumbo's not going to be what Nelson Cruz is. Trumbo's not as good a hitter as Nelson Cruz is. Period. But
he has been so far.
His bat can play in this lineup, and we've talked about why before. I'll tell you what. I mean, I think one thing that might be helpful is to sort of offset as we go forward through the course of the season. Pedro Alvarez and Mark Trumbo's sort of in a platoon, and that's not a true platoon, but as Alvarez's bat has started to heat up, I think that, Trumbo, it wouldn't hurt to sit him a day or two here and there and let Pedro Alvarez get in there a little more often as DH, so that you can have Reimold and Rickard and Kim sharing those outfield spots so that defensively they're better out there, and you get a little bit different look in the lineup with a little bit more speed, a little bit more making contact, or in theory trying to do that, and guys that are a little better suited to try and get on base to set up runs for the rest of the guys. I don't know if Buck's going to do that. He certainly seems to have, rewarded Trumbo with a lot of time in the lineup where Alvarez, who got off to a slow start, hasn't gotten that. But we'll see. Here's what I will tell you. In years past, when they were for 14 seasons when they were awful, the worst thing you wanted to see was an American League East team come into Baltimore because the Orioles were going to get their butts kicked. And,
how about the Tampa stat that they had never swept them in 4 games, right? I mean, when I think of bad teams, it wouldn't shock me to say, well, they never did that to the Red Sox or the Yankees. I thought somewhere along the line they were better than the Rays at some point in my memory. But then you forget how good the Rays were for a long time, right?
Well, the Rays got good around 2008, 2009. And that was, the Orioles were still 3 years away from getting out of the abyss that was the beginning of the 21st century for them. There were a lot of games where both teams were bad, and then there were a lot of games in those few years leading up to the Orioles redefining respectability for themselves where they got trounced by the Rays. So, that history, you remember it one way, but it's not necessarily what actually happened. But, whether it was the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Rays for a time, the Orioles got beat around for a long time. It was hard to see them play against their own divisional competition. And probably the defining piece to the last 5 years is that they have competed and played against all of those teams. They've beat up on the Red Sox, quite frankly, over the last few years. And the Yankees, they've been more than respectable. And they've done fairly well against the Rays. The Blue Jays in the last 2 seasons, 15 and 16, have been their most worthy adversary. They got trounced last year, and they've sort of traded off beating up each other here in 2016. So those teams sort of match up well. The Orioles have made their biggest moves, frankly, playing the division, as much as you sort of look at the next round, going out to the West Coast and say, well, these are clubs they should beat up on, I get a little nervous about these because on paper, you're right. This is where they should start to make some moves. But we've often seen this team, not in 14. In 14, they got on that roll really on the West Coast in the second half, and they never stopped. But in the last few years, they've struggled more outside of the division with talent that they don't see as much, that they aren't as familiar with. They've done really well against the teams that they see the most. So, I mean, yes, on paper, I think that it looks like they should really get going here, but I would say a little beware, because this is where the Bats have struggled with pitchers they don't see as frequently. And they struggle a little bit in bigger ballparks as well, and they're about to go out and play in some of them here on the West Coast.
Well, it's Jimenez and Gallardo are no stranger to Petco Park. They both have seen it, and these are supposed to be the guys making the big bucks. Going to be very interesting little two-gamer out in San Diego against a bad baseball team. And by the way, talking about bad baseball teams, anything you want to say on the Rays at this point in how bad that they've looked? I know we started the conversation there and never really went into it, but to see that team lose 11 games in a row and see them be really a shadow of what you thought they would be when the season started, for Minnesota, for other teams out there that really believe they were better than they were going to be, this Tampa team's one of the more disappointing teams in all of Major League Baseball. Maybe this side of, I don't know. I would say, St. Louis, I think, has been a little bit of a disappointment, but not crazy, but low expectation. Arizona's been a disappointment for sure. They had some expectations, but nothing quite like what Tampa had, I think.
Well, I mean, Arizona, they went out and sort of hoped that a couple of starting pitchers would make the difference. They lost arguably their second most important positional player before the season started, and the two guys they bought haven't been traded for. One is Shelby Miller, and he's shown himself to be younger than they thought. And Greinke got off to a slow start, finally starting to show up now. And the Cardinals just, I don't know that they've been bad so much as the Cubs have been too good to keep up with.
Well, you remember when at 500, if 530 ball in that division would win that division, no more,
sure,
right?
Sure. Look, the Rays, a couple things. Chris Archer and Smiley, who I think had a lot of expectation on them. Chris Archer was expected to be the number one, and he's shown himself to be young, still too young to carry that mantle. Smiley has struggled here a little bit. Odorizzi's been okay, but probably not exactly what they thought it could be. Matt Moore's still coming back from Tommy John, and he looks like it, and he's still young as well. And arguably their most accomplished pitcher, they're the guy that was really going to help carry it, in Alex Cobb, has not come back yet from injury, and I think that they're looking for him to be back after the All-Star break, maybe closer to August. So, I mean, what you have is a pitching staff that's still young and hasn't been able to hold it together. And what they have done is score more runs than anyone would have expected, but they've battled a lot of injuries offensively. Steve Pearce, who is having this, in the course of having the season that I know Dan Duquette was hoping he'd have in 15, is getting it done in Tampa, and he's been on the shelf now for a couple different stints on the DL, and they've missed him, and they got Corey Dickerson from the Colorado Rockies, who they were looking for to be a big component, and while he's hit some balls to the ballpark, hasn't upped his batting average. So, I mean, they're a team that's tried to piece it together, and some of the pieces haven't worked out the way they've planned, and they've had to battle some injury. And then again, quite frankly, they're missing some really smart baseball men with know-how that makes a difference. I mean, I hear these discussions all the time about what a manager, how many wins a manager is good for, and sabermetricians try to attach that to something, and that is a number that nobody can actually determine. It's not mathematically possible to determine that. But if you don't think that Joe Madden had a significant positive impact on their organization, you're insane. And if you don't believe that Buck is worth more than the wins that he's brought to the team in terms of tangible numbers, you're insane. You just aren't paying attention to what's actually happening. Dusty Baker, Dusty Baker keeps getting fired from places because they don't win the World Series, and after he's gone, those places fall back into the pit that he helped them crawl out of. Personalities and know-how and ability, when you're trying to keep 25 people and more together through 7.5 months, if you're lucky, of baseball makes a difference. And to not have them changes the game. Do I believe, can I tangibly quantify for you what impact Joe Madden might have on Chris Archer and Drew Smiley if he were there? No, I can't. Would I tell you with every fiber of my existence that I believe that they would be better than they are right now if he were still in Tampa? Absolutely. And that very different.
And pitch, too.
You make it right away. It's
WNST.net. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. Alan and I get together once or twice a week, talk some Oriole baseball. I'm sure we'll be talking a little more after this quick San Diego series and then the trip up to Seattle this week. Jimenez, Gallardo, and a full deck of hitters, at least at this point, and then waiting on Darren O'Day. We'll have Luke and Alan talking more Oriole baseball as the week goes on. Anything you missed, you can find in the bio Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear wherever the internet is served. Don't forget, the morning newspaper also reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, and I'm sure there is a Planet Fitness right around the corner from you. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's powered up by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home. Staying up late with Oriole baseball and getting ready for our WNST Rock Week. I have been editing a whole bunch of 25-year-old conversations with the likes of Daryl Hall and John Bon Jovi and Billy Joel and David Bowie, amongst others, Mike Campbell and Pat Benatar and Billy Squire. I did all this stuff over the weekend. That'll all be out the week of July 11th. The hashtag is WNST Rock Week. I am Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and